Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I am actually quite excited to make this video. If you are an OG of my channel, you probably will recognize the city of Mark45 as it has been a topic that has been brought up a lot. Even up to this day, I cannot express just how proud I am for this city. It's been one of my greatest creations, not just in Minecraft, but in general. It is years and years of grinding and hard work. In the beginning of the channel, one of the first few videos I did regarding the Minecraft and regarding the city were the Minecraft SkyTrain videos. Our city has a very vast and diverse and effective SkyTrain system. Now, for those of you wondering, the hell is SkyTrain? As a person from Vancouver, we associate SkyTrain as the metro train system that you may have in your city, the automatic or not automatic subway system, or trains, or just metro lines, I don't know what you want to call it. So in this video, while I will not exactly be logging into my city and showing you guys all the different lines and the stations and all that, I will be instead explaining the evolution of our system, how much it has changed since the creation of the city. Now, the city is very old, to the point where it actually is older than this channel. I had this city before I even created Mark45 Studios. So these are the rough sketches of the 3 SkyTrain lines in the world. These diagrams will be the ones you would see at the stations instead of, searching it up on a map. We can now talk about the evolution of this network and how it went from 2 stations to this massive chunk. So let's get right to it. The first thing that appeared in Metro Mark45 was number 1, the Zoo 45, which you may recognize as I've done videos on that. The nearby village of Fulton Village wanted to bring tourists over, however, roads haven't been built yet. People had to walk across hills and trenches and go through a lot of not so pleasant terrain to get to the zoo and the roller coaster and all that. So, with my small little government, we decided it wouldn't be a bad idea if we just made a little railway to connect that village so people can get over here a lot easier. First station right across the entrance of the zoo, which is called the City of Mark45. What an original name. The first stretch of rails was built. This is the original branch of SkyTrain rails ever laid on the city, which is still here today, but we consider this part between the City Mark45 and Blizzard City the OG. Now, Fulton Village, which was what Blizzard City was called back then, absolutely loved it. And they set up a spot to build their own station, which was called Fulton Village back then. After the 2 stations were built, it was time to build the rails to connect the 2. And we built the first stretch of the Pacific Railway. Tourists from both villages went to each other's village, and people from Fulton were able to enjoy the goodness that we were starting up at the City of Mark45. As more people were coming, we began to realize, our village isn't big enough. We should probably establish another place for the moment. And in comes Vincent. And he said, you know what? Let me start my own place. And so, he first started by establishing a capital city, which is now called Night Striker Castle. However, back then it was just simply called the Desert Village. My exploration team has discovered the stronghold in our world. As you probably know, in vanilla Minecraft, every world has a stronghold. I looked at the Pacific Railway, which was already there, and I said, why don't I just take something we already have and expand it? It would be great if that was no longer a railway but running between our 2 villages. Let's take this railway that we already have and expand it to connect to number 1, the stronghold that we've discovered, and number 2, to the secret cave, because some people have decided to stay at the secret cave. And this would be the perfect way to connect everyone together to the city. Our governments all agreed, and we decided to initiate Project Pacific Line. The first thing we did, of course, was renaming the Pacific Railway into the Pacific Line. And we had to change the technology and make it into a SkyTrain network. The city of Mark45 station was rebuilt because the first design was completely a wooden box and it looked absolutely stupid. So we decided to rebuild that. Same thing with Fulton Village, which Darren has claimed ownership of. The first phase of this new extension was to extend it to the stronghold because that was only one stopover and that was easy. Eventually the line was finished and was terminating at the secret cave. This was the new Pacific Line, from Gateway to Stronghold. It is now 2016, 1 year later. The downtown core was slowly becoming into a downtown core, and there were talks about eventually turning the village into a mega metropolitan downtown city. And there was talks about potentially moving the zoo, tearing it down, and rebuilding it into a big government building, which was a big commitment we had to do. So we gave the get-go. Why not? We had the resources anyways, and we decided to expand the Pacific Line once again, this time to the west. From Stronghold Station, we traversed around the houses that were being built, extended the line to the tiny village station, which will later become the City of Mark45 residential area. Then we extended one more stop over after having to cut through a bunch of mountains again, then called the Land of Mat 123, which will now be called Ashleytown. This was the new western terminus of the Pacific Line. Meanwhile, looking back east, we had an old abandoned railway system that was once used by the old villagers to just move villagers from Sterling Island to our main city. However, that railway would become abandoned and not used. Even after we started building the Pacific Line, that railway was just disregarded and deemed useless after seeing how old it was. And so the officials in our government thought it would be a better idea if we made a rapid train express. And the construction team moved forward and scouted out the railway and said, yep, this is doable. We can turn this into a high-speed train, bullet train railway that's not part of the SkyTrain network, but it uses a conductor-powered train. And so the West Coast Express was born. We took the end of the line at the city port and established a station out of that. We looked at the old jungle temple and said we should probably put a station there so people at the spawn point can transfer. So the first 4 stations of the West Coast Express was born, and this was the establishment of the West Coast Express over a set of abandoned rails. A couple months later, the line would be expanded again, looking at the Pacific Line once again. As a new ferry terminal was being built, for our city it only made sense in order to establish a connection from that ferry terminal to the city, that we would extend the Pacific Line. And so, because the line had to cross over a body of water to get to the ferry terminal, the first sky bridge was established as we've expanded the line over into the ferry terminal. The main problem was the city downtown core was being built, and it was basically impossible to fit another guideway just running straight through the Twin Towers core. And so someone said, what if we do underground? Make it a subway. We opted that would be the best solution, as it would actually be easier to construct. Tunnel work and construction began, and the Gordillo Tunnel line was born, running from the St. Vincent Castle to Jiu-Jitsu Plains. Of course, this line will later be renamed to the Night Striker Castle to Osaka Castle. It's a castle-to-castle line. We decided the best way to do it was to actually extend the Pacific Line and just have it connect to this new line. Not directly connect, but have a shared station, so transferring will be easier because it's within the same station. the metro line was planned. The metro line was going to be built into 2 phases to cut down the cost and the labor work. The first phase was for the people that actually needed it, i.e. the capital city and the university. Phase 2 would later continue from the AJ capital to the ocean temples because there were communities there that needed a connection as well. The first phase of the construction of the metro line was created, starting off with the expansion of the Pacific line. It extended from the secret cave to Mount Vinkland. The first phase of the metro line was built, running between Savannah Village and Taiga Village. Later on, of course, all these stations would go through a renaming phase, but here is just a rough list of all the old names. It has now been another couple months since the metro line has opened. A new little village was established in the downtown core called Minitown, which was then serving the Gordila 10 line station called Polar Peaks. So the station renamed itself to Minitown. And because the West Coast Express is relatively nearby, the decision was made to add an additional station nearby called Minitown. This is the newest and latest station to the West Coast Express, connecting, while not directly, but the transferring between Gordila 10 line and the West Coast Express was made easy because of this new station. It was time to give the green light to take the Gordila 10 line to the airport as well. However, ocean temples were also discovered there, and for some reason we had a love for ocean temples, so when the airport branch was built, right here where the line splits, right before it hits Mount Colorado Station, we decided to name it Ocean Temples for the moment until the airport was fully ready. Thus, this is now the new branch of the Gordila 10 line, and this is the only line in the system that splits into 2 branches. And finally, last but definitely not the least, the final phase of the metro line. Phase 2, which was to connect the communities of Columbia, the AJ Residential, Polar Peaks, the Woodland Mansions, and Ocean Temples all together to the rest of the Metro Mark 45 network. The final phase of the metro line was built and opened a couple months later. And this is the network that we have today. While there are no plans at all to continue building new lines or expanding current lines, our project right now has been to remake all the stations and go through a lot of renaming of the stations because of the developments that have been happening around it. So here is that same diagram of all the original station names. And this is the system we have today with all the current new station names. As you can see, the network has seen a lot. It has been developing alongside the whole city, and I cannot express how proud I am for it. And this is the system we have. And eventually, soon, I will be able to show you guys what each line looks like by actually going onto the server, going onto the world, taking you guys through the different lines and showing you what we have there. And what has changed. What has significantly changed. This is the evolution of our SkyTrain network. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions about some of the stuff we've made, feel free to ask, leave a comment, tell me what you want to know. And we'll see you all in the future SkyTrain videos. Bye for now.